Hello and welcome to our discussion about Handel's Messiah. My name is Duarte and I'm Principal Oboist with the Academy of Ancient Music, and I'm joined by three distinguished colleagues and friends. We have Julia Kuhn, Principal Second Violin with the Academy of Ancient Music, Ruth Kiang, who is one of our vocalists for these performances, and our music director, Laurence Cummings. Laurence, can I start with you? You have performed this piece countless times. How has your approach changed over the years?
Well, like probably many of the audience, I was very lucky to encounter this wonderful masterwork when I was at school, singing in the choir, and that initial enthusiasm was then reinforced by Christopher Hogwood's fantastic recording of Messiah with the Academy of Ancient Music, and that really was a life-changing moment for me. And then when I got to perform it as a professional musician, first of all I was playing harpsichord for a lot of other people, and that was a wonderful experience to get to know it from inside the work. And then when I got to direct it myself, I was very fortunate that the first performance I conducted was actually in Dublin, and it felt very sort of right somehow to be at the home of the first performance and we were performing it in St Patrick's Cathedral, and we did it as the first performance had been done. So that was with the soloists really coming from the choir and then going back into the choir. And I think probably the thing that artistically has developed as I've got to know the piece better and better is how much of the message of the music is in the rhetoric, the relationship between the text and the music. And I would encourage everyone to think of it as theatre of the mind, so that you are thinking of a dramatic story. It's a wonderful tableau. You know, it's telling this narrative story in three parts: birth, crucifixion, resurrection. And as we go through that territory, the rhetorical language changes, of course, for each particular moment. You feel the grief, you feel the joy, you feel the hope. And the luxury of oratorio, in a sense, because it's this theatre of the mind, is that you can bring your own colours, your own experiences, your own pain, your own joy, and also means you can be the theatre designer and set designer. You can choose your setting. It's a little bit, in that sense, like a radio play. You know, so much of it is in your imagination. And for me, that's the jewel of Messiah, is that it speaks to everyone because everyone can relate to it. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit, Laurence, about what you can expect to hear at a AAM performance of Messiah?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because everyone, I think, has an idea of what Messiah is, and you know, whether that be from their own personal experience of having sung in the choir at an event or just having heard it. But actually, there are so many different versions. I mean, the original version that Handel performed was actually without, well, it was with smallish forces in Dublin, and the soloists all sang along with the chorus, and so it was very organic, the solos coming out of the choir and going back into the choir. And he, you could say, resurrected it many times, and changed it, of course, because every great composer changes things as they go. And so we have so many different versions to choose from, and it can be a bit bewildering, actually. We're going for a version from the early 1750s, which it seems fairly clear had four soloists. So we're having four soloists, and we're doing it complete, which is, I find, the best way to get the arc of the piece. And so you get the da capos are in, the repetitions of the ABA form for the various arias that those occur for. and we're having standout soloists as was customary by the time it got to the 1750s.
You mentioned the arc of the piece. Now, of course, you've directed this piece countless times, but one of the times that sticks in the memory most is a version that was staged at the Colosseum here in London. I was wondering what you thought about the dramatic structure of Messiah, and does it lend itself very well to being staged?
Well, it's probably the most challenging of Handel's oratorios to stage, because I think pretty much all the other oratorios tell a very clear biblical story, moment by moment. So you get a narrative, you get the characters, you meet them individually, they tell the story. I mean, let's be honest, most of Handel's oratorios are really sacred operas. Now, the difference between opera and oratorio, of course, is that oratorio is theatre of the mind. There wouldn't have been action on stage, but they were performed in theatres, so they're not ecclesiastical pieces. They're pieces to get involved in these dramas and tell often a very religious and deep message through that medium. But the thing with Messiah, of course, is that, I mean, it is a dramatic story. It's a very clear narrative, because the first part is all about birth, the second part is Christ's death on the cross, and the third part is the resurrection. So yes, there's a through line, but as you explore those lines, the characters of the singers are much more blurred. I mean, you can argue that the tenor is the evangelist. You know, he arrives at the beginning saying, "Comfort ye" to everybody, and sort of is our way in, is our conduit into the story. The soprano sings the music of the angel and sings "Rejoice" to Mary. So that's one part. The bass is the man of mystery, so giving us the sort of the spiritual real content. And I think the alto soloist is talking on behalf of the audience. It's sort of the human soul, if you like. But who may abide the day of his coming? Are we up to this task? You know, that's the question. But they're not assigned characters in the score, and even as I'm saying it, I'm realising how subjective it all is, because you might all totally disagree with me. And in fact, coming back to the staging that we did in the Colosseum with English National Opera, it was directed by Deborah Warner, and it was a very thoughtful process, because the wonderful thing about staging oratorios, whether or not you think it's a good idea, is that you get all this time. So we had 6 weeks to rehearse rather than 6 hours. And that allows you to sort of get under the skin of the piece, which I'm forever grateful for. Because there were a few funny moments where we had a great cast of soloists, and then we would, it came to "Oh Death, Where Is Thy Sting?" And it was Catherine Wyn Rogers and John Mark Ainsley, who, I mean, I'd already conducted it many times by then, but they must have done twice as many performances. And we sat in the room with Deborah and did what you do in a sort of opera setting. We spoke through the text and we started to unpick it. Well, 3 hours later, we were nowhere near having agreed on what it was actually meaning, because the significance of that text is so strong. And it really made me chuckle, because I thought, well, these two artists have sung it together so many times, and presumably they've always thought they were saying the same thing. But in fact, and it was wonderful, because of course it is a rhetorical debate between the two soloists in any case. So it's little details like that for me made that production so special. And I've found that with staging other Handel oratorios, though you do get some moments which are difficult to stage, because, as I said, it's theatre of the mind. So Handel gives you pretty much everything in the music, So "See Where She Lies." So, well, you don't need to say that, because if you're staging it, she's lying there. So there are moments like that. But I think, as I've said, just being able to get under the skin of the piece is so rewarding.
And of course, we won't be staging our performances. Ruth, as a singer, what sort of process do you go through to try and get all of these different colours out of each different vocal number?
Well, I think as singers, we have to embody the meaning of the text to achieve the right affect in the music, and that's absolutely crucial. The intention of the text informs how we sing and informs the musical colour. And I think it's really important to embody it, to fully understand what it is we're singing. We're not just singing text, we're singing meaning, and that's what determines and drives how we articulate.
How can we convince audiences in 2024? What do we need to do perhaps differently to Handel back in the 1750s?
Well, I think the message of the Messiah, for me, it's extremely human. It's dealing with things that we've had to deal with forever. Suffering, redemption, everybody on any level, whoever they are, they can relate to this. And ultimately, it's a story of hope and joy. And I think we've got to have that in mind as we perform it.
Now, Julia, I think you were brought up in Halle, is that correct? It's a lovely Handelian connection. Obviously, in the UK, whenever it gets to December, I mean, my Christmas season doesn't start until I've played the first notes of the overture to Messiah. Is there a similar tradition in Germany, in Handel's native land?
It is certainly done. I have done it in German, even, the Messiah, Der Messias, which was quite interesting, actually, how it changes, because the text is different and all of that. But I have to say, as far as Christmas favorite goes, the Christmas oratory by Bach does take center stage there. In terms of, what happens here in the UK, everybody does it. Every choral society, every concert hall puts it on. It would be the Christmas oratorio in Germany.
I see.
Okay.
Second spot.
Yeah, well, yes.
If you'd never seen this piece before, would you know it was by Handel?
It's a very interesting question, and going back to what Ruth and Laurence said about text and rhetoric and meaning and drama in the music, we just look at it, it's all there. And what makes it really Handel to me is how he just paints the words and puts it into music. And you really have everything there. And you see he comes from opera, definitely. It is not stilted, it's not stiff, it has real drama in it. And, the way he portrays, say, I don't know, things like darkness or hope or despair, even humor. There's quite a lot of humor in there as well, when the angels come in flying and all that kind of stuff. So you would, yes, I think I would say with confidence that I would know it was by Handel, just by looking at how he paints it for the instruments.
Now, Handel was a violinist, perhaps not a very good violinist. Are there any bits in Messiah that you really don't look forward to playing?
Let's say there are certain bits that are not so desirable to play, yes, indeed. I can show you one, which is, I remember one of the first, or maybe even the first Messiah I ever did when I was still a student here in London. I was sat at the back of a section and for some reason was sort of close to the oboist, and in came Rejoice, which is done at various speeds, and at that moment it's very fast. And there is one bit, which is typical for Handel in fast movement and fast music, that he sometimes, you notice he goes from what he thinks is possible on the keyboard, definitely. What might be quite easy to play on here is not very idiosyncratic for the violin. So there's a bit that goes, I play it slowly. That's not comfortable. And if you play, that's been practiced for 12 years.
It sounds like it.
But I do remember when that bit comes up, everybody gears up, and then we played it, and it, to various success. And then this oboe player just sort of leans over with his oboe into my music, and he goes like, tick. So that was, there are moments like that. They're not unplayable, and certainly I think Handel does know how to write for the violin. Sometimes maybe he was just like, well, okay, fine, you just have to get on with it. I think, you're a professional violin player, so your loss. It's like Beethoven said, I don't care about your fiddle, just do it. So, but, on the other hand, when it does come to tunes, I mean, it's the most satisfying thing to play, you know, those wonderful tunes for the first violin. So.
Laurence, Messiah's done a lot. Are there any other oratorios that are on your wish list?
Golly, well, I'm in the very fortunate position, I'm pretty sure, that I've at some point been involved in all of them. So I love them all. I mean, the standout ones for me, well, the thing is, as you answer that question, I've already replaced the one I was going to say with another one, so because they're all such great pieces. But the one that I keep coming back to is Athaliah, which is a relatively early oratorio from the 1730s. And I think partly because when I was a student, there was a wonderful recording which Christopher Hogwood made with the Academy of Ancient Music. And I remember hearing about it and thinking the casting was extraordinary because it was Joan Sutherland and Emma Kirkby as the two sopranos. And I was just thinking, how is that ever going to work? But of course, it was actually brilliant casting because both singers totally embodied the two different characters, the two different kinds of queen you can be, if you like. And it's just such a wonderful oratorio with all the choruses. But then there are, you know, Solomon, Samson, they're all just fantastic. So, and in a sense, the ones that get to be performed more often, I suppose, in the UK are often the big chorus ones. So Israel in Egypt and Judas Maccabeus and Solomon sometimes. But the ones that perhaps are a little bit neglected, Joseph and His Brethren, I think, is a wonderful piece. I mean, it's not the best libretto, but what Handel does with it is extraordinary, and it does have an aria about a pelican.
Talking about choirs, now, of course, we're used to hearing Messiah in all sorts of different formats, with you know, very small choral forces to enormous choral forces. Now, back in the 18th century, the tradition started probably after Handel's day to have these enormous massed forces. Do you prefer singing with huge choral voices, or do you prefer the more intimate settings?
It's a very interesting question. I think there really is room for both. For me, it's a wonderful privilege to sing with a really wonderful professional chorus of people who really know how to use their voices, who can achieve all the colours, where you can really work on nuance in the sound and do everything you want to do to really show the drama, show the text. But singing in a large performance, I've sung in many big performances with massed community choirs, and it's a really interesting and very different experience. For them, often it's the very first time they've ever sung the Messiah, and that's a wonderful thing to be part of, because we've sung it, I've sung it many, many times, and it's wonderful every time, and it changes and it evolves for me personally. But to be part of someone's very first performance of such a wonderful piece is very, very special. And I think there's so much you can do with varying the colour in a large performance. Some choruses will be sung with everybody and some just with small forces. And that's a really nice and interesting thing to do. It gives a real intimacy to the smaller choruses, to the more difficult choruses, and ultimately facilitates such a performance taking place where some of the choruses they're very hard technically and perhaps too hard for a very big massed chorus. And so it's a really nice and inclusive way to make it work.
And now, Julia, we've heard the bit of Messiah that you don't look forward to playing the most. But now perhaps I'd like to ask all three of you, if it's not too much of putting you on the spot, to pick your favourite moment of the Messiah. We'll start with you, Julia.
I mean, there's so many, but there is one particular bit I always look forward to, and unfortunately doesn't happen very often because it gets cut a lot. It's in the aria right toward the end, the trumpet shall sound, which is of course an all-time favorite. Often only the A section is being done because, you know, by that point we're nearing 2 hours and 40 minutes, and often, you know, directors decide to, oh, well, let's cut the B part, which for me I find that a real shame, because I find that bit really, really beautiful. And also how Handel paints the words there, because it's, I don't know the exact wording now, it's something about, mortals achieving immortality, and how he paints the word immortality. It goes on forever and forever and forever, and up and down and up and down, and all of that.
I think that's absolutely right. And yet, with the smallest of forces, it's just one voice and the continuo line. So it's just, you look on the page, it's just 2 lines of music. Yeah. And as you've said, I mean, I always try and include it because it's the crux of the whole piece,
exactly.
But I do understand, particularly if there's a feeling it has to be, within a 3-hour period. But it seems such a shame. And of course, the A section is also definitely worth hearing twice, with the trumpet coming in and doing that wonderful thing. As you say, that word painting that you get, and having had this huge soundscape for 2, you're absolutely right with your timing as well, very, very efficient, 2 hours, 40 minutes, you get that sort of intimacy of the true message of what the whole piece is, so it's very strong.
Mm-hmm. Ruth, how about you?
Gosh, there are so many, and I think I change my mind about this all the time, but I really love singing Since By Man Came Death, because it's such an intimate moment, and it's a point of real colour change, and often done a cappella, not always, but I find it's very still, it's very beautiful, and then the resurrection, and it's such a wonderful, joyful change between the 2 sections, and I find that extremely moving. And the final Amen, which is just, it's wonderful. It's the climax of the whole thing. It's just full of everything, and we all love singing it. Yeah, and as an oboist, my role in the Messiah is normally just playing the choruses, and I have to say that's the moment that I look forward to the most. It's useful that it's at the end, because there's always something worth looking forward to. But it's just the very last line, when the trumpets come in and everything seems to just weave together this incredible tapestry. Yeah, it really is worth staying to the end of a 3-hour performance. Yes, indeed. Laurence, how about you? If you had to choose one standout moment.
It's actually the same moment, but actually very specific, a particular specific moment. I mean, obviously the whole piece is so engrossing, and you get to the Amen, and there's that wonderful a cappella section where the choir are on their own with the continuo. And then you get the 2 strands of the violins coming in, and then he just whacks up the volume for the final bits of Amen. But it's not those moments. It's actually the bit right at the end where the fugue is going so these voices have chased each other around the texture for so long, and then suddenly they go into stretto, where the voices come in one after the other, really without waiting for the other one to finish their line, and that the tenor who comes on an E after the soprano it just always makes me want to cry, so that's the moment for me of where it's transcendent.
Thank you very much, Laurence, and thank you very much, all 3 of you, Julia, Ruth, Laurence. Looking forward to seeing you on the concert platform, and thank you very much for joining us.